with cyber fraud. The meeting is going to be recorded. It's also being live streamed on YouTube to allow as many people to engage with us as possible. So if you don't know about Demos, we are a cross-party think tank. We are involved in understanding the fast changing world we live in and trying to involve the public in the difficult and complicated policy conversations that we have to have in order to be able to navigate those challenges. We're delighted to be working with Vodafone on this series of events around cybersecurity for small and medium businesses. It's something that we've done extensive work on before. At Demos, we have a technology program where we've looked at a whole range of different ways in which cyber crime is affecting both consumers and businesses. And it's also something that's very dear to Vodafone's heart, as Anne Sheehan from Vodafone will be explaining in just a minute. Delighted to be joined also by the Minister, Matt Warman, by Mike Cherry from the FSB, and of course by Emma Jones, who is the founder of Enterprise Nation. Without further ado, Anne, who unfortunately, it's terrible running a technology company and having technology difficulties.
I know. Something has gone wrong on the camera, but maybe I'll appear in the middle of this. Let's see. Hopefully I will.
We shall hope. We shall hope for a miracle. But it is absolutely, it's not a criticism of Vodafone, which is, I'm sure, a very reliable technology provider. And we're delighted to have you with us. Tell us what Vodafone's thinking is around cybercrime. Obviously, it's been massive during the pandemic, as so many people have had to pivot to providing things they didn't do before online. That creates new opportunities, but also new risks.
Sure. So first of all, I would like to thank Demos for organising this event, and it's really, really an important topic. And I'd like to particularly thank the Minister for taking the time to come and talk with us today. I know, Minister, you're a strong advocate within government for investment in digital security. I guess in Vodafone, we have a long history of supporting SMEs with our technology and expertise, and we've really intensified the work that we've been doing, both directly with our customers and actually with Emma and Enterprise Nation, particularly in the middle of COVID. And while the pandemic has accelerated the existing trend towards digitalization, it's also caused huge disruption for small businesses, and we see that in our daily interactions. And I think the pandemic brought the importance of digital security into really sharp focus. And we could really see that many of our customers, and particularly our small to medium business, are totally reliant on digital operations. So having the right cyber protections in place should now be really treated like the most basic form of insurance. It's like, it's a must-have. It's no longer like an optional extra. I think it's also clear that I think small businesses have increasingly been targeted by cyber criminals who struggle to break through the cyber defenses of bigger organizations. So therefore small to medium are a target. And I think what we've seen, according to Hiscox, at least one small business is successfully hacked every 19 seconds in the UK. So it's quite incredible. And in the digital economy, even the biggest businesses are only as protected as their smallest supplier. So we really believe in SME cybersecurity should be treated as a matter of national economic resilience. That's why we've worked with the WPI strategy to publish Protecting Our SMEs, Cybersecurity in the New World of Work. And the report outlines how vulnerable SMEs are to cyber crime across the UK. Particularly during COVID, particularly during a lockdown. And again, as I said, the greater reliance they have on digital operations. So through our polling in the summer of 2020, we discovered that a quarter of SMEs could not continue to operate their business as normal if they suffered a cyber attack, which is roughly 1.3 million businesses in the UK. And a further 16% of SMEs, that's the equivalent of almost 1 million companies, said the financial impact of a cyber attack would result them having to lay off staff and a real, business impact. And I think what we've tried to do within Vodafone is to really, so what are we going to do about it, right? Or what have we done about it? And we teamed up with Accenture to provide enterprise grade cybersecurity to SMEs with our Vodafone managed security services. And that's really priced at, kind of sub 1,000, sub 2,000 pounds. That's really accessible. So you take the best of Vodafone and the best of Accenture and put packages out there to really help small to medium businesses get started and really address this issue. I think, though, to ensure that SMEs are protected in the long term, we do need government, we need the cybersecurity providers, we need large businesses like Vodafone. We all need to work together to help to provide small businesses with the financial support and particularly the skills. So we do see a lot in Vodafone where small to medium businesses will buy software, whatever, but only about 40% of them know what to do with it and how to use it. So I think we all need to work together to address to that. And our report outlines some potential interventions, such as additional funding and resources for the National Cybersecurity Centre to specifically support SMEs more proactively. And I think we would also encourage government to explore greater financial incentives for SMEs to encourage the adoption of security software. And that could be ministered through tax breaks, grants, loans, and the government's Help to Grow digital voucher scheme. I think we've got a model that can really help there. I think we, from our perspective, we are providing training, and we announced in conjunction with Emma and Enterprise Nation that we would help digitally train 100,000 SMEs, and we've had massive take up, and security is part of that. So I think we'll continue to work in conjunction with the Centre, with Enterprise Nation, with industry, cross industry, actually, whoever we feel we need to work with to try and help small to medium businesses. So I think that's the summary from the Vodafone position, and I'm really looking forward to a good discussion today with my fellow panelists. And at some point I might get my camera working so you can actually see me.
And thank you so much for outlining that. Matt Warman, I know, Matt, it's very difficult when people are asking for tax breaks, so I'm not going to push you on that one. But I know that the government is keen on doing everything they can to enable businesses to make the most of all of the extraordinary opportunities that the digital economy offers to us, but also managing the risks, not least because it encourages people to get involved if they don't feel afraid. So it'd be great if you could outline for us what the government's thinking and priorities are on these issues at the moment.
Lovely. Thank you, Polly. And interesting to hear that Vodafone perspective. It won't surprise you to know that I can't promise tax breaks here and now, but we obviously hear the call. So thank you to Demos and to Vodafone for organising it. I mean, it won't surprise you to hear that keeping the UK secure online is a huge priority for the government, and now more than ever, that cyber resilience is really obviously important. And I think one of the most remarkable aspects of the last 15 months has been the really rapid adoption of digital technology in a way that we perhaps didn't really envisage ever really happening, if that makes sense. I think if you'd have said a couple of years ago that GPs would be operating in the way that they are now, then people would have really struggled to believe you, and the same is true of a whole host of other digital bits of the economy. So security is hugely important and offers us great opportunities to, as the phrase goes, build back better, because I do think there is a big chunk of work that has been achieved already, but there is still a huge amount more to do. And we can only do that if our money and our data are safe. So cybersecurity underpins all of that stuff. And that's why we were already working through the National Cybersecurity Strategy, backed by £1.9 billion. It's why we'd already been working through the National Cybersecurity Centre. And it's great that there has been genuine progress over the last 5 years via government and other organisations to make sure that businesses in particular are more resilient to cyber breaches and attacks. That is good news, but that doesn't mean for a second the government underestimates the risk. We know slightly different statistics from Anne's, but there are plenty of horrifying statistics. We know that 4 in 10 small businesses has been hacked over the last 12 months or so. 1 in 5 of those end up losing money or data or assets or some other negative impact. So whether it's staff time getting diverted, whether it's cash, there is a big reason to implement new measures to stop future attacks, and that comes at a cost, but that cost is less than the average micro or small business, which loses an average of £8,000 per hack. Now, that is on top of any reputational damage, because people are much more alive than they have been for a long time to the prospect of signing up for a company that doesn't keep your data secure. And on top of that, there is then the growing threat from ransomware, which obviously brings its own set of really complicated challenges, and can of course bring its own, even if there is a theoretical ransom to be paid, it never means that there's actually a realistic chance of getting some of the data back. So there's a whole host of problems. Great to see Anne has wrestled with the camera, wrestled the camera into submission. So we need, I think, collectively working with the private sector, working with things like the cyber-aware campaign from the NCSC to really raise the bar when it comes to awareness, but also raise the bar, particularly in small businesses, around saying this is not something that should be an intimidating thing to take on. It is foundationally important, but it is also not impossible for small businesses to deal with, and to really put up barriers to the sorts of attacks that we do see, because the vast majority of those attacks, or whatever it might be, are using pretty basic vectors, and they need to I think be fairly easy for people to tackle, and the good news is that they broadly are. So things like cyber-aware, which provides a tailored cyber action plan so that small businesses can know what to do, I think is a really important step. It provides free advice to small businesses, and a free online training module to staff as well, like really nuts and bolts stuff that is good, I think the right thing for government to be doing. And there's also, of course, the Cyber Essentials scheme, which is specifically designed for SMEs, low cost way of getting a good standard of protection in place. And huge numbers of businesses have used those channels for advice and support over the last year, but we've got a long way to go until all 6 million or so businesses have got adequate measures in place. Part of it is about getting the message out, and that's why events like this are so valuable. But there's also a lot of good work that's being done with industry partners that I think, whether it's the FSB or whether it's the CBI or a whole host of those other organisations, there's good work being done, but there is more to do to tackle those barriers. And so what I think we need to think about is two or three things. We are improving cybersecurity legislation, making sure that we're targeting the right organisations. We're strengthening looking at how we strengthen corporate governance and reporting. And then there's raising the corporate understanding of cyber risk and helping companies crucially to manage their supply chains, because we have seen that it is the relatively small or relatively less known players that have often provided a way in for some sort of cyber breach. So I think really interested to hear views today from people on those different aspects. And finally, the other thing that we've got to do is grow the skills base, because ultimately it's no good saying to businesses, you've got to do something about this, if there is not the people out there for them to go and hire to help them if that's what they need, or to build the packages that they might need to install across their own networks. So we're working to make that digital environment more secure in a host of ways. But we've also got to make sure that we don't take our eye off potential future threats, which is why, for instance, we're legislating around the security of smart devices. So those I don't know, whether it's a doorbell or a thermostat or whatever, you can be confident that now that it's connected to the internet, it's not another way for someone to break into your house or your business. So lots and lots of things to do, looking carefully at the whole of the supply chain in those different areas. And then finally, later this year, we'll be publishing a strategy paper on business resilience and cybersecurity to set out the government's future plans to help businesses increase their digital resilience, drawing together all the stuff that I've spoken about and more, and publish as well the broader new national cyber strategy that will lay out the sort of the whole spectrum of challenges that we face. So I'll finish there, but I think the main thing I would seek to leave people with, if I can, is that government ambition that we talked about so much in the past about making the UK the safest place to live and work online is only going to be achieved if we work together with the private sector to raise that awareness of the foundational importance of cybersecurity, and really keen to hear from people today about what more you'd like to see government doing, and I appreciate, thankfully, that it is not all about tax breaks, so we can do some stuff that is significantly more achievable in the short term, and I think we should be optimistic about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. Some really important messages there around skills, around the supply chain. I think when we've been looking at this, it's both a source of risk, but also a source of opportunity for ways for larger players who understand things or who have the capability and the capacity to actually support and protect people to get through those procurement challenges and barriers and keep the whole supply chain safe. You also talked a lot about partnership working, and couldn't agree more that getting the private sector, government, the third sector, and of course membership organizations who understand deeply the lived experience of so many business owners, business managers. So that's why it's great. Our last two speakers are from membership organizations. So first, Mike from the FSB. Mike is the national chairman of the FSB, and I think you have been doing things for the FSB for 20 years. Fantastic. And is also runs a timber manufacturing business in Burton-on-Trent. Mike, what does it look like from the FSB's perspective?
Well, it's challenging, as I think everyone is now truly aware of. But I think it was the FSB back in 2005, Matt, with one of your predecessors, where we realized just how serious this was, even at that time. And of course, with the pandemic, it's become even more crucial that small businesses are aware of what they can do. And we brought out a report, and we had our top 10 tips. And that's difficult to say, even without having a glass of wine or anything else in your hand. But it is important that small businesses understand what it is that they can actually do, the simple things that they can do themselves, whether that be updating your antivirus, whether it be taking regular backups, and we're all terribly bad at doing that, and being aware that, you know, today, the number of just basic phishing attacks you get coming into email boxes are so cleverly disguised, or can be, along with the malware, that you just need to be very aware of it and raise the awareness of your staff as well. There are some members who are saying, well, you know, some of my staff wouldn't even trust with an email address because they open the can of worms, if you like, and let something in, which is absolutely fine. But it does mean that that business probably isn't working at its full productivity if you have to do that. But passwords is another thing. But I think, you know, this has now been 6 years since we brought that report out. We updated it only last year. And of course, a lot of this presupposes that you've got good connectivity. So I will throw that one back at you, Matt, because I think one thing that the pandemic has highlighted is just how important it is for those businesses who need to have connection. They've got good connectivity, because too many have been, and they still are, shut at the moment, and too many are still only open with limited support from their customers coming back in, whether that be footfall or anything else. And a lot have been able to move into being online. Too many still haven't got that connectivity. But I think also helping people to know what it is that they can do, what is safe, where do I go to, who can I trust? You know, you get multiple offers coming through in all sorts of ways today. So knowing who are the trusted people, that will be certainly FSB. I'm pleased to say our surveys do show that FSB is a trusted organization. I'm sure Emma finds exactly the same with Enterprise Nation, and CBI mentioned as well, Matt. So, you know, do use your business organizations and associations, because they should be ones that you can trust. But making people aware of what they can simply do themselves how important it is if you're in a supply chain to have cyber essentials. It's simple to access, it's simple to do, but again, that raises another spectrum. What we also highlighted back in 2005, and it's still a problem today, is if you have something that you want to report, where do you report it to? Action fraud still is not best known for the organization that should be able to tackle this, but they're also needing more resource to enable them to respond effectively in conjunction with the National Cybersecurity Centre. And I think, government has a role there that needs a little bit more work on it to make sure that businesses, know who they can report issues to quickly and easily, and that it's going to be tackled. And then, of course, you need to have the insurance industry able to provide proper insurance at affordable cost to help businesses when they do get an attack, whether it be ransomware, malware, or something else, and you suddenly find your website's down. They need to know that they've got that cover in place so that something can be quickly done. But from some of the reports we're getting, the estimated costs are going absolutely through the roof. And of course, that means that insurance on what insurance is actually needed for small businesses is often unaffordable. And that raises a whole host of other questions at the moment around insurance for requirements around public liability and employee liability. That you are finding that premiums are just going through the roof. So I think, again, government does have a role to do there for both PL and EL, so that businesses have something that they can afford to meet legislative requirements. So I've said a lot, but I'm looking forward to the discussions and picking up perhaps on some of the points that have been raised.
Mike, thank you very much. So our final speaker, before I hand over to questions, is Emma Jones from Enterprise Nation, which Emma founded and has amazingly grown to 75,000 people who benefit from events and support as they found and develop their businesses. I'm sure that people who are listening in will have questions or thoughts. Matt has been very clear that he is in listening mode, wants to hear our ideas for what government or its partners could do more of, better. So just as you're listening, do post questions in the Q&A at the bottom so that I can then pose those to our wonderful panel. Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Polly, and thanks both to Demos and to Vodafone. It's lovely to be here with such esteemed panelists. Mike, who I haven't seen for a very long time, but I know has been labouring to help small businesses through everything. So I guess one of the virtues of speaking at the end is what else can you add to the discussion when people have said and made such kind of valid points. So I guess very briefly to finish us off sort of before Q&A, Polly, as you mentioned, we help actually over 500,000 founders per year at the moment to kind of help them get started, but also to keep growing. And I have to say, thinking ahead of this session today, as the Minister and Anne have said, kind of so many businesses pivoted so quickly to do things online back in March of last year that I feel we have a real responsibility now to make sure that they are protected, because Enterprise Nation, alongside FSB and other organisations, delivered lots of digital training programmes. So, you know, the Amazon Small Business Accelerator, we're delighted to work with Anne and a great man called Andrew Stevens, who's in Anne's team and the small business team, on a great programme called Business.Connected, to which Anne referred. So all of this is training small businesses on how they've built websites, how they've moved on to social media platforms. And so, as I say, it kind of feels like a responsibility of us as business support providers to now kind of make sure this level of protection is in place. But I guess another point that's just been made on this session is small business owners are very busy, and in our years of delivering advice and support to small businesses, there's a very common kind of three factors that, regardless of the support that businesses are looking for, always come up. And those three kind of barriers or kind of questions that a business poses to themselves is, you know, I would get help, but what part of the business needs help? So they don't understand which bit kind of needs supporting. Once I do know which bit of the business needs help, back to Mike's point, who do I trust to help me then kind of get that solution in place. And then the third thing is, how much will I be expected to pay? And so just kind of some of the work that we work on very actively at the moment is, how do we encourage small businesses to answer basic questions? So how as the UK can we build smarter diagnostic tools to help busy business owners understand, you know, if you answer some questions, we will help guide you onto the part of the business that needs help. Then connecting you into, the heart of Enterprise Nation really is our platform that connects small businesses to trusted advisors. And I know this is something that Vodafone also very heavily believes in, is that it's very much proven through lots and lots of reports that small businesses who adopt digital technologies are much more likely to see the gains and the benefit of them if it comes with human mentorship, training, peer support plugged in. So we always feel that, yes, let's help small businesses adopt digital technologies, but then let's really connect them to a peer group. So if it's cloud accounting software that you've just adopted, you can say to somebody else, or did you need a bookkeeper to figure that out? How have you used this? But also connect them into trusted digital advisors who can say, now you've used this, let's move you on to the next level of sophistication and let's make sure you're protected. So I think the more that we can connect advice into the business owners, and almost from the start of someone starting a business, how do we kind of land the message that you're starting a business, it will be digitally enabled, so let's make sure you're protected from the outset. And I loved Anne's comment where she said, it's the new form of insurance. I love this kind of concept because, you know, when we're training startups to get started, we always advise that they take out business insurance. I'm not quite sure that we advise they take out cyber protection. So how do we make sure it kind of gets onto the beginning of the curriculum? And of course, all of this showing price transparency, so small businesses know what they can be expected to pay. We ourselves actually were quoted as a business what I thought was quite a steep amount for an external audit and cyber governance report recently. And I did think, I wonder if there should be more accreditation in the market of advisors, because again, it builds up that trust with small businesses that if they know the type of advisor they're using, they know that's an accredited person and they know how much they're expected to pay. So I think those kind of considerations of how do we get the advice to the businesses is important. And just a couple of final comments to kind of lead into the discussion. Anne mentioned Help to Grow Digital. It's a great programme that government is launching later this year. It will give £5,000 vouchers to small businesses to access software. Government is going live with 3 forms of kind of software. So CRM, accounting, and e-commerce is the third one. And one thing, I was talking to an organisation this morning called Codec, which is probably known to Polly. Mike will know them, Anne will know them. So they're a great organisation lobbying for digital improvements. Codec are very keen to see the sectors, the categories in Help to Grow expanded. So one consideration is, could Help to Grow Digital, and Minister, I am looking at you on this one, could Help to Grow Digital go live with cybersecurity included as one of those first categories? Because I think that would send out a really strong signal to say that government is very aware that this is an issue and kind of looking to fix it. And then the very final thing I'd say is, it's a really critical topic, and I'm delighted that Vodafone and Demos are putting on this event. But one thing that worries me a little bit about cybersecurity is how it's promoted to small businesses. And the word insurance has been mentioned a couple of times on the call, and I'll never forget, I once spoke at a business event after someone from an insurance company, and I'm sorry to say this, I was completely depressed because the insurance man quite naturally was saying to an audience of small business owners, if you don't buy my product, you will be flooded, or you will lose all of your data, or someone in your team will die and you won't be covered. And it was just a really, really negative message. And bearing in mind, this is an audience of people who spot gaps in the market, they turn their passion into a profit. They're very optimistic by nature, they're entrepreneurial. And so I just love, and if it could come up in this discussion, I'd love to kind of discuss it further. How do we promote cybersecurity as a positive thing to do in your business to get that kind of change and growth, as opposed to, if you don't do this, terrible things will happen to you, because I know there's, you know, lots of marketing talk of should you sell a vitamin or a painkiller. We currently promote cybersecurity as a painkiller, and I just wonder if there could be a bit more of, if you adopt this, these are all the great things that will happen to your business. So hopefully kind of helpful comments to get the discussion going. Thanks, Polly.
Incredibly helpful, Emma. And I think you've brought us seamlessly onto an excellent first question from Sam Gold at Which, the consumer organisation, around insecure products which are available to SMEs and consumers through online marketplaces, putting them at increased cyber risk. And in a way that the greater the cyber risks, both the more important it is that people go out and buy a product, whatever that might be, but the question of trust, how do you find a trusted provider? Should that be through certification? Because the greater the risks, the more likely it is that actually people end up buying something that's either just useless or actively malware. And it's kind of in a way that when people are frightened, they can actually make really quite serious mistakes. So Anne, what are your thoughts on that? And then I'll come to Matt, whether you think there ought to be more certification or regulation in that marketplace.
Yeah, because I think it's very difficult for small to medium business. I mean, the market is flooded at the moment. If you go in and just type in security, you'll just be bombarded with different offers. And I think for any small to medium business, it's got to be organizations that they trust, kind of like an enterprise nation or the federated bodies. I think that's the first. I think the second is that's why I think, no, can any one company do it alone? I'm not too sure. And that's why I think you need government, you need some of the operators, because the operators are important, right? We have millions of customers between us and our competitors. And therefore, you know, customers look to us to say, well, I take, you know, my connectivity from you, I'm flowing my data through your network, help me be secure. So then we have a responsibility to help them and educate them. And I think the work that we've been doing with Emma is, the easy part is sell them something. The hard part is to help them adopt it and to understand what they're doing with it, which is why we did Business Connected, which is, let's just train them free. Let's give them the interactive workshops, build communities. And the biggest thing when it's me is a community, which is, I've just got this piece of, you know, whatever, you know, a cybersecurity software from Vodafone and Accenture, for example. Then I need to know what to do with it. I need to know how to operationalize it so it's effective for my business. So just giving a piece of software out, honestly, to a lot of SMEs, unless you're a bit more sophisticated and tech savvy, is a complete waste of time. Unless you can give them the mechanism on which they understand what to do with it and they understand how it fits in with their business and what they're trying to protect, then it's a waste of time. And I think on the Help to Grow scheme, Minister, I think that's important, because I think there is going to be the voucher scheme that will be given to SMEs. There will be huge adoption for that. And it is, if we can get the security included on the list of things, I think it will really help, because a lot of industry are coming together, yeah, and we're all forming partnerships to help, you know, get that program up and running when I think it's August or September. And therefore not having security as part of that voucher scheme, I think, is a missed opportunity.
Matt, I mean, thoughts on that if you want to share them, but also this question of do we need more regulation in this market, or is that just going to drive out innovation?
So I think on the scheme that will launch later on in the year, then I think there are lots of representations being made along similar but different lines, and obviously security is a hugely important area, and I know the Treasury is keen to make sure we get the very best bang for our buck on this scheme. So we are obviously keen to continue to push that angle. On the security of devices, I mean, the whole point of the product safety bill that will be coming relatively soon is to say you've got to I think, do the sort of things that only government can do, which is regulate this kind of space so that consumers can be confident that when they buy that webcam or whatever it might be, that there are really basic levels that have been met. And at the moment, you've got sort of products that are out there that have no option to change the password, and the password that it arrives with is password. And it's like, this is not a secure framework for people to work within. So the point of this PSTI bill is to say that we can do something about that. And it's a starting point that tackles the very basic stuff. And it is quite shocking how much of that very basic stuff is still out there in terms of the errors that people might make when it comes to making sure their own networks are secure. That said, I do think it's also important to bear in mind that it's not just about regulation, it is also about education. It is about saying to people, when you've bought this thing and you can change the password, you should think about changing the password. So this is not simply something that government can do alone. It's something where we've got to work with the sector, both to raise the standards of the security of the products in the first place, but also to, which are, and there are obviously sort of good examples and bad examples of that. But we've also got to work with the public to raise that level of awareness around consumer devices, especially when consumer devices very often find their way into business networks themselves, and offer a potential way in for people who have pretty basic skills at their disposal, but those basic skills are very easy to harness if you have low levels of security in the first place.
Emma or Mike, thoughts on this, or on that education piece? It seems to me that it needs to go far beyond simply company owners or managers, right down often to it's new or entry-level staff who may provide vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I think one thing, Polly, if I may, on this one, I mean, clearly the business owner themselves often needs some education, some help, some support, some mentoring, some understanding of what it is that they're trying to actually do sometimes, because their skill base is certainly not cybersecurity. It's probably, not even computers. Most of us have to learn what we're doing with them to use them effectively. And I think exactly the same with cyber. They need to know what it is and how to do it, and how to make sure that they are secure. And this is why getting information out to them on the very simple things, reminding them that they must do the updates to the software they're using, the updates to the antivirus, making sure that they take regular backups is a first start to help them understand. And it comes back to Emma's point about, making this a positive thing. The benefits are immense to avoid you having to spend a lot of time and possibly lose quite a bit of money in having to rectify a problem that could simply have been solved from the outset with a little bit of education and support there in the first place.
Emma?
Yeah, just a final comment. I thought it was really interesting that the question came from, I think you said Sam from Which, but a representative from Which, because I know when Help to Grow Digital was announced, I don't know whether the Chancellor actually said this in the budget, but I know that the government vision is to almost have Help to Grow Digital as a Which for software. So that, and for me, the amazing job that Which does is it's kind of rated and reviewed by experts, and then rated and reviewed by people who look like you. So I guess the vision that we have of all things technology is, where can a small business go to get to see a place where ratings and reviews have been given by business owners to say, this software is good, this has helped me grow as a business. So how can we kind of create that trust? And then just a final comment back to the role of advisors. One thing that we always think is really effective as a route to communicate a message that either government or the private sector wants to communicate to small businesses is a concept we call train the trainer. So go to their advisors, because if you go to one IT advisor and say, cyber is really important, here are great products for your clients. If they've got 25 clients, you only need a set number of advisors before you've reached hopefully a big community of small businesses. So I think it's kind of, yes, we have to focus on education for the small business owner, but let's also look at training up digital advisors so they feel confident to have those conversations. And then again, just how do we get peers referencing kind of useful and good software to their own community groups?
I'm just going to share a couple more questions so we can get through a few more of them. A couple from Francesca Sassetti. First is about ensuring that cybersecurity is taken seriously when it's a sort of fault with the human condition, isn't it? We're no good at learning from anything except experience. So people only consider it a priority often after a major incident or security breach. And also, Francesca comments on the kind of escalation of arms that we get with attackers and hackers, who are always coming up with more complex and subtle techniques. And I also there's another question from Aaron Marin, which I also think is worth bringing in, which is around culture. He's written no BAME culture. I'm pretty sure he means no blame culture. But it's really important to enable people or create a culture where people can come forward. And I wonder, Emma, do you have thoughts around those culture, the kind of cultural questions around the emotions of how do you take it seriously before it's a problem when you're busy, and how do you make sure that it's, you're not just making the people who create vulnerabilities feel bad about themselves and therefore hiding the truth of what they've done?
Well, it's almost even kind of worse than that as to why people won't say, and I don't know if there's anything that could be done on this, but there's a similar parallel to this that I spoke earlier this week. We have a new small business commissioner in the UK, brilliant woman called Liz Barclay. Her job is to stamp out late payment. And when she came on a call, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this, but she said the big issue remains is that small businesses don't want to report bad payment practices into the small business commissioner because they fear losing the client who's not paying them. And the one thing about all of this is if a small business owner has a data breach, if they report it to the ICO, which is who you are meant to report it to, that is then made publicly available. So ICO have actually just recently, I saw something come through a couple of days ago, they showed how many hacks kind of big companies have had, but you'd like to think big companies can deal with this. If you report this to the ICO and it's made publicly available, and you're a small business, but maybe you sell into government or you sell into large clients, or you just sell into anyone, all of a sudden that raises suspicion amongst your suppliers. Is this a company we want to deal with? So if anything, at the moment, small businesses are not incentivized to report that issues have happened to them. And therefore, we're probably not hearing any extent of the cases that are actually going on because they're not being publicly reported. So this is kind of why it comes back to the messaging. And as I say, I know that because this is such an essential thing, I don't know how it can be kind of sugar-coated, but how do we kind of show more? And actually, again, in speaking to Liz Barclay this week, I said, how are you going to approach prompt payment? And she said, I'm going to showcase those who are doing it the best. And that's what I just think we would have to do here is let's showcase companies who are happy to say, it happened to me, I took precautions, now look at how it's helping me win new clients. You could do this too. So I think we will have to rely on showcasing good practice, because I'm not quite sure we can rely on small businesses to report it, because they will fear that their turnover and sales could be badly impacted as a result of doing that.
I agree. And I think just to build on Emma's point, I think it's also talking about it more education, helping them with the skills. And I think making sure we encourage them to be more parts of communities, because for any of us, even large organizations, cybersecurity is just changing on a daily basis. Different people hacks are different one day than they are the next day. So it's not as if, what you found out last week is the same. It's just evolving all the time. So everybody, whether you're a large organization or a small organization, is learning as we go. And that's why being part of a community is really important. I really agree with you, Emma, in terms of trying to, as part of the communities, to trying to reach out to small business and tell them the positive stories. Like a lot of small to medium suppliers that are suppliers into the large organizations, we want to help them. Yeah, we want to help them to be more secure. And we do that in Vodafone with the companies that do business with us. We do audits on them, we help them, we say you've got some corrective action, because we're all in it together. We're totally reliant on them to be secure. We learn things maybe because we're a larger organization that can help them. So it's trying to kind of get out there that we're all in it together. Yeah, it's not like buying a piece of, ERP software or accounting software where it doesn't really change that often. This is something that changes on a daily basis. So more conversations, more discussions like this, I think being more positive about it and creating a more support environment is absolutely critical. And I think we all have an onus, particularly the large organizations have an onus, I think, to do more to help.
That's really fascinating. It reminds me of the work I think successive secretaries of state for health have done to try and build that culture of a transparency about mistakes and openness to enable us to actually get beyond them. Matt, do you have thoughts on it? Obviously it's not something that government can't just wave a magic wand and make
No,
everybody
no.
transparent. You know, it's a long, kind of gritty, difficult work, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if only we could wave a magic wand. Everyone cites.
We should
the-
legislate for that. See what happens.
Yeah, someone promised an owl for everyone at some election or other, but it's maybe a wand would have been a better idea. So we're getting very Harry Potter. I think the point about this is that we do have to keep in mind that you obviously can't wave a magic wand, but what you can do is that sort of constant raising of awareness, and it does come. I think it comes back to making sure that people know what the right tools look like, all of that sort of fairly obvious stuff, but it is just keep hammering away kind of thing. And I think a lot of this stuff is out there, a lot of it is free, a lot of it is really easy to access if you know where to look. And with the best will in the world, people are not going to be Googling NCSC, but they might be looking to the FSB, for example, for sort of what does best practice look like. So it's about using all of the best ways in to get trusted voices out there in front of the right people. And it's never going to be perfect. It's never, you can no more create a sort of perfectly secure network than you can a perfectly secure house, but you've got to, and you've got to encourage people to understand the risks, but you've also got to, I think, encourage people to realize that they can do an awful lot to metaphorically bolt the doors and lock the windows.
Jonathan Turner from the fantastic Fair for All Finance asks around SME boards. Of course, the smallest businesses might not have something as formal as a board, but asks about whether they feel sufficiently well equipped or experienced to handle their responsibilities. And I think gives another really good example of how intermediate organizations can be really useful, saying that at Fair for All Finance, they just ran a session for community finance boards. Sorry, my children have just arrived home. I'll put myself on mute in a moment, alongside NCSC. Mike, what else are the FSB and other kind of organizations doing to get that message out?
Well, clearly, to understand what your responsibilities are, there's a lot of help out there that we put out so our members know what they have to do if you're having to comply under GDPR regulations, and indeed to the point about informing the ICO. But I think people shouldn't be wary of informing the regulators, whether it be the ICO or how you report a crime to action fraud, because they are actually there to make sure that you do get some help in understanding what you can do. But I think the important thing is, if you're in a supply chain, then obviously, as I've mentioned, you've got Cyber Essentials that you can sign up to. That's there to help you and to point you to the simpler things that you can do yourself, and also give you some guidance on other things that may not be so simple, to ensure that you are accredited or signed up to that particular bit of help. There are other things, though, that businesses do need to be aware of. And I think this comes back to the thing about skills and education and mentoring. You know, boards do have a responsibility to make sure that they are fully compliant in many different ways. And I think this is just another one that they have to undertake and seek third-party support if they realize that they haven't got the skills in-house. And it comes back to that other point, you know, who do you go to? Who do you trust? Is it FSB? Do you tie up with something like Enterprise Nation and Vodafone to get that support coming through to you? And I think everybody has got a role to play in raising both the risks and the support that is already out there, whether it's coming through to us or elsewhere.
To be on the red tablet.
Sorry, we're just having an argument about. Anyway, I'll tell you later.
Too sick to have the red tablet.
Right. So.
He's too sick to have the red tablet, though.
I'm just imagining, Polly, that the discussion that's going on
There's
between
a really
you.
there's a lot of background story.
He's too
Okay,
sick to have
I'm in a meeting now. I'll talk to you in a second. Okay, so. Honestly, the risk to my sanity from this. Anyway, never mind. No. So Nigel King says that he has advised clients on NIST cybersecurity essentials and UK cyber essentials, and really likes the NIST model. There's a lot happening internationally, And it makes me think, though, if anybody wants to talk about NOST in particular, is one of the things we haven't really talked about. We're all about, as Matt says, metaphorically, how do you bolt the doors? And we're not talking about the burglars. We're not really talking about the bad guys. And that's partly because so much of it is international. So as we come to the end, I wonder if people have thoughts on what we can do more so that, so that reporting line to action fraud actually, has some chance of getting to some guy in Belarus or whatever it is being arrested. What more does anybody think we can do? Or should we just focus on the logs?
No, I think we highlighted probably on that one back in 2005 that if you are reporting things to action fraud and you are involving the National Cybersecurity Centre, then they can't do it alone. It has to be pan-governmental, if you like. Each country has to be buying into this whole agenda so that businesses, consumers, individuals can get the maximum protection that's possible, because we're just seeing a huge number of attacks coming in, some of them very, very simple, some of them extremely sophisticated attacks by organized groups wherever they hail from. And I think, all of us, as Anna's very rightly said, we've all got a role to play in this, educating, informing, helping, but simply showing businesses the very simple steps, the initial steps that they can do to help themselves.
And Matt, in terms of both the technology which we're developing and deploying and the approaches and cyber more broadly, the government's got the strategy you were talking about earlier. Is this part of global Britain and an area where we want to be leaders as well?
Well, I think we're in the really positive position that cyber is a massive opportunity for UK PLC as well. We've got really great companies doing their research in the UK, and we've got really great British companies as well. So there's lots of good work to capitalize on there. And that's part of what the cyber strategy will be aiming to do later this year. It's about saying, how do you take that sort of full spectrum approach that says there is at one end of the spectrum, there is the national security end of cyber. At the other end of that spectrum, there is the individual's protection. And there is then, on the other side of the coin, if you like, the work that we do everywhere from the smallest SME advising other SMEs on their own cybersecurity right up to GCHQ. And there are skills gaps in every single one of those levels, but there are real opportunities in getting people into those sorts of jobs. And that is what will allow us to build on the existing system so that you have a government response that meshes with the private sector response, and then also allows us to continue to maintain that capability that sees us able to liaise with other countries around the world to say, well, actually what we're picking up here is not homegrown cyber fraud or whatever it might be. We think we need to go after people in other countries and work with international partners on that. So it's absolutely true to say that there needs to be a pan-government response. That's what the cyber strategy seeks to, or will seek to deliver, and it will do it with one eye on the international scene as well. So there's lots of work going on, and I think there's lots of reasons, as I say, to be optimistic, but there's no point in being optimistic without that really basic raising of awareness that we've all talked about in various different ways.
Do you share that view, Emma?
Well, I was just going to say, and it's interesting kind of hearing on the international level, I do think this consideration will drive more small businesses onto conducting their trade through international marketplaces such as Etsy, such as Amazon, because of course, if you're a big marketplace, you are watching this all the time. And like Anne says, it's kind of changing every day. There will be hordes of teams at the global marketplaces looking at this. So just one option for any small businesses listening in is, if you build your own website, you have your own payment system plugged in and you've got your own CRM system, of course, you are susceptible to activity and to being hacked. But if you are trading via a third-party platform where this huge insurance is in place, I think this is why many small businesses are opting to sell via third-party platforms. And then just the one thing that businesses need to be careful on there is we have had reports from some small businesses where they've built their business presence on a social media platform, their account has been hacked and their whole business has gone down on the back of it, and they've got no alternative. So it's, I kind of feel for businesses because they're slightly in this, shall I go via other platforms, but then I'm not de-risking my business because I'm putting all of my trade in one place. But I think, again, and it's been mentioned so many times, this, if there can be a partnership of private sector working with government through these discussions of how do you regulate but not over-regulate so business becomes too difficult to do, and then how do you get that perfect blend of helping businesses put diversification into their business so it's protecting them from a technology perspective.
And final words to you.
I think, first of all, I think it's been a great discussion, and I think if I was to summarize, I think it is about private-public partnerships. I think we all need to work together and in a sincere way. So this is about really and truly helping our small to medium businesses, because it's the biggest threat. I think there's a massive opportunity for them, but it is probably one of the biggest single threat that faces them. We need to make it simple and easy for them. I think creating communities like FSB, what we see in Enterprise Nation, are absolutely critical. I think it's great to see such focus and support from government. I think we've given the Minister some ideas, so hopefully he'll take those on board. I think a lot of it, we need to keep the conversations going. This is just one today, but we need much more conversation about this, because conversation does help. Yeah, it really helps. And it takes that kind of fear away, which I think is one of the biggest obstacles. I think Emma makes some very valid points. I mean, if you're small to medium business and you're going with the large platforms, you are, I guess, you know, in a bit of a safer environment because they'll take that risk away. But then you don't want to stifle innovation and difference. So therefore we do need to look at regulation. I would agree with Emma, not over regulate so it becomes too difficult. But my biggest view would be, let's keep the conversations going. Let's keep our ideas hopefully going to, you know, to the Minister, and let's just keep working on it together.
Fantastic. Enormously grateful to all of those who've listened in and asked questions. Thank you, of course, to the Minister, to Mike, to Anne, and to Emma. And for anybody who's listening in, if you are interested in working with Demos on research or events, do please drop me a line anytime. We are always interested in almost everything. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Polly.
Bye, everyone.